Many generations have fought in the battles that we have been fighting in for so long. I will be the first of my kind to finish this great battle which we have fought for so long, for all time fighting, for the right to fight in the war. There's been lots of fighting. There's been fighting everywhere. Just so much fighting. I fight now to finish fighting. Hello and welcome to the Third Circle video this week. My name is Guy, and today we're talking campaigns. We're really going to delve into campaigns themselves. We're going to unpack it more so than we did last week. So let's look at this stuff. So adventure versus campaign. What's the real difference in terms of design, in terms of building, in terms of structuring? Is there a difference? Something to think about that one. Overarching story. Isn't that a campaign? You'll be surprised. Themes and codes, how those are going to help us to actually write our campaign. And then risk. The campaign is the riskiest thing that you will undertake as a game master. It really is terrifying what will happen in a campaign. So let's go. Adventure versus campaign. What does a campaign offer? What does it really offer? It offers connections of stories, of adventures, and of lives. Now that's a grand statement, but when we think about it, the campaign is going to link the player characters to the central story. It's going to link the NPCs to the story and the NPCs to the players. It's going to link the villains, the monsters, the villains, the adventures. All of those are linked together. All of those are linked to the NPCs and to the PCs, and they are also linked to the central story, to that central plot. Not all of them. There are a few that are going to be outside of that space, but primarily it connects things. It links things together, and it really, really helps us to understand the true nature of a living, breathing space. And if you do it correctly, the player characters will have caused it to happen. You've planned it to happen, but the player characters will cause it to happen, utilizing each of those connected stories, each of those connected lives to making a difference. Now, that's point number one. Point number two, investment. We've invested a huge amount of time. We spoke about it last month where we were saying, there's nothing greater that humans can do in terms of a collective narrative than to spend years creating the story using all of the parameters in which we operate. It's a truly remarkable achievement. So there is this investment of time, generally speaking, in the game, but also within your friends. And there's nothing better than that. So definitely that's what a campaign brings to us. Adventures don't necessarily do that for us. Adventures don't offer that. So when we talk about grand conclusion of a campaign, uniting everything together, adventures don't need that. If you run 20 adventures, the adventures have nothing to do with each other. That's okay. It's a perfectly acceptable form of role-playing. When those 20 adventures link together, however, that's when we get a campaign. If you play with the same bunch of people for 20 years and you just run adventures, you never run a campaign, you're going to get the same kind of investment and the same kind of socializing that you would get with a grand campaign. But if the players are changing characters because the characters are not necessarily integral to those adventures, there isn't necessarily going to be the same sense of satisfaction and conclusion that happens. There is a connection between the players, the GM, their characters, and the story. And that connection is something that grows over time. It requires sustenance. In other words, it needs to be fed. And that's something that is responsible from both your side and from the player's side as well. Never underestimate that as much effort that you put into the game, fellow players must equally do so. Otherwise, the great balance, the cycle is broken, and one of you becomes the prey, the other the predator, feeding upon the creativity of the prey until there's nothing left. It is this kind of cycle that we must make sure we enshrine is your work, their work, together you create something better than when you started. Well, I'll cut you off next time, shall I? Okay, overarching story. It's more than just you. This is the interesting thing. When you are creating a campaign, you have to bear in mind it's not yours. You are the architect, but the builders, the interior designers, all of those components are other people that you have to work with. It's a wonderful collaborative experience. So you're going to have PCs. Their stories are going to change and mold and temper your main campaign. You have to be prepared for that. You have to accept that, and you have to embrace it. If you embrace it, again, you're bringing in all of those wonderful stories. You are tying everything together. You are creating your master campaign. You are being a truly great GM. When you ignore those things, however, that's when you start to lose it. And anyway. We're also talking long-term. Very seldom will a campaign play out within a 24-hour time frame in the game time. In real time, it'll take years or months or weeks. I mean, there's no real definition of how long a campaign should be, just that it should be suitably epic. The idea that we have more time in-game sometimes might not have much meaning for us. We go, well, okay, so you've got more time. Great, what does that mean? It means that we have the opportunity for finesse, for the little details that will make the stories feel even more real. When you look at grand, epic adventures, Star Wars or Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, it is the little things that happen during the downtime that make the characters feel as if they're real. Second breakfast, for example. Those kinds of things only happen when you have lots of time. If you're doing an adventure, each adventure, maybe there's a little bit of time in there, but the general anticipation is finish the adventure. When you have a campaign, and suddenly months or years start to take place, and the characters are going to change, they're going to grow up, they're going to get older. If we look at the new Witcher series, there's decades that pass between the beginning and the end of the entire period within that show. In those decades, things happen. Sometimes we see them, sometimes we don't. But it's about making the characters and the world feel more alive. We can also introduce the idea of destiny. This is the most terrifying moment for a lot of GMs, where we try and predict the future. No one can predict the future. Well, in reality, sure. But in our game world, where we have the power to control how that world, how that universe works, we can. And we're going to look at how to do that in terms of how to be able to create predictions about future events that you know nothing about, but which you can orchestrate to manifest themselves. In other words, in role-playing games, in campaigns, destiny is created not necessarily by the character, but by the GM as the stories unfold. So we're going to look at that as well. Campaigns allow you to do that. They give you that opportunity. And it's a wonderfully powerful tool that, again, will make you stand out from someone who doesn't necessarily do that. Major touchy. Destiny. How I love destiny. It creates this amazing sense of the scale in which the gods themselves are trying to drive the characters. There is a sense that our characters, our player characters, are the most important component in the entire universe. For without them, the destiny will be lost. There are some players, however, who do not want destiny to be guiding them, who do not want to be the focus of a celestial being's intentions for the future. When you are trying to establish a destiny for a character, speak to the player beforehand. Take them aside, listen. I want to reveal tonight that your character is the one true born, and that with your blood you could save the world or cause its destruction. What do you think about that for your character? You'd be amazed at how some players do not want this at all. For them, the pressure of being the central character is too much, and they don't want that. They want to be able to explore and make mistakes without consequences. There is a huge pressure that you are placing upon that player when you are making their character the focus of the entire destiny. That is something that maybe they do not like. You must ask first. That's the best way to do it. There you go. Themes and codes. Adventures might have a theme. They might very well do that. But it's short-lived. It's the duration of the adventure. And yes, you could have the same theme over and over and over in the adventure, subsequent adventures. I don't think that would be very entertaining, though. In a campaign, you have the opportunity for more sophisticated themes, where individuals have got themes which are only expressed and understood over the course of multiple sessions. You are crafting the theme for this particular NPC who's going to be part of the PC's lives for a significant amount of game time. This NPC's theme is revenge. And for the first 5 or 6 adventures, we don't even know that that's their theme. They're just there. They're just doing their thing. Well, you know that they're there, and you know that they're setting up for their thing, for revenge to come out later on. And so midway through the campaign, they suddenly open up. They really want revenge against a character. And then 6 weeks later, they ask for help to get revenge. The theme has driven our story. It's driven our narrative. It's driven that NPC link into the main storyline. Because when they help, they will get a clue that will help them with the main plot, etc., etc., etc. So sophistication of narrative is what is really allowed when we start to talk about campaigns. Those themes can build expectation. So when we encounter Count Dracula, we have a whole lot of expectations that go with him. When we encounter the young woman who was wronged by Dracula, who she escaped, she wants to go back and hunt him down. We expect so much. Themes are really, really powerful. And again, we develop them over time. And when the players are not aware of the theme to begin with, when it kind of hits them by surprise, like, whoa, where did that come from? Yeah, if you follow back and okay, so that means maybe in the future. That's where we want to be. We want to be the point where the PCs, where the players are anticipating where we're going. It is that anticipation that makes the game that much more enjoyable. A campaign also allows you to plan. When you've got lots of different adventures, you don't know what the adventures are going to do. They don't link together, so it doesn't really matter. When you're running a campaign, though, you can plan and you can really look at it and go, aha, so I need this to happen in order for that to happen, in order for that to happen. I've got this theme that's going to be running through the entire thing, so we're going to start the theme in this way. I need an adventure to do that. We're going to have an adventure here to express the theme, and then towards the end, we're going to have another adventure to conclude that theme. So it allows us to create these structures that we wouldn't normally have if we were just kind of ad-libbing it as we went, if we were sort of making it up on the fly. You can, if you're very good and if you're very, very skilled at doing all of this, you can do it, no doubt about it, and hopefully you will be able to do it in the future. But the campaign allows us to plan without reservation. With reservation, Professor Creasy. There is so much when we talk about theme that we can draw from. We shouldn't be constrained by it. We should challenge it. So the theme of war, for example, is generally seen as individuals involved in a war and they are suffering as a result, wherever they might be. They might be soldiers fighting in the war. They might be a family member left behind as a result of a war. There is usually a struggle. There is usually suffering. Sometimes, though, we could find happiness within that space. We need to, of course, align it so that there are other things that we expect. Violence, death, and grisliness that goes with war. Suffering and strife needs to be there because that is what we expect. But we can turn it on its head by simply understanding what the theme means and then realizing that there is always a different angle a different angle to every theme. Once we start to realize that, we start to understand the power that themes have in terms of helping us really to come up with some really fantastically wonderful ideas that are going to make our campaigns feel as if they are these epic wonders, and that we are truly the great game masters that we are. Now, if we understand how to use themes, well, then who's to say that we're not? What a fascinating mind you must have. Okay, we're talking about risk campaigns. Now, the biggest risk is that the campaign doesn't finish. And that means a wasted amount of time from your behalf, unsatisfaction from behalf of your players, and a disillusionment generally with role-playing altogether. That's the biggest risk, but I think it's one that's well worth it. When we look at how or why or what reason do campaigns fail, oftentimes they collapse because the players leave or the PCs die, and you've got this campaign that you've designed around a few core group of PCs, and well, they get wiped out in a TPK, and you go, well, I can't really have your grandchildren. You could have your grandchildren pick that up, by the way, if you were a little bit creative and if the players really wanted to continue the storyline. But the idea is that if the players leave, if they move to a different country, for example, oftentimes it's just no fun without them anymore, and as a result, the campaign collapses. Could be too long as well. Sometimes the campaign is just dreary and it keeps going, and just when the players think they're about to achieve victory, oh, they fail again and have to start all over again, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And it does get a little long in the tooth after a while, and people get bored. If there's no end in sight, it's like, oh my goodness, it's like another Tolkien song. Come on, let's just finish this up and let's get over with it. Sometimes it can be too long and people lose interest. It could mutate. Not that kind of mutation. A campaign that starts off as ostensibly a horror campaign, if by the end of it everyone's Care Bears and unicorns, or towards the middle of it they're Care Bears and unicorns, and then by the end of it they're flying in spaceships, I don't know what kind of circus this is, but it's not what I signed up for. That's an extreme example. Players can sometimes get very disillusioned if you promise them grand adventure on the high seas and somehow they just get stuck on land where there's no sailing whatsoever. And so the characters that they've built have no relevance based on the information that you gave them. So this mutation causes things to go in just the wrong direction. You can save it by bringing it back. Of course, by this stage, it's too late. And then finally, hatred. There's nothing worse than an unsatisfactory conclusion. I was responsible for this many times in my long career of role-playing, where I have thought I have come up with a brilliant ending, which is just wonderful, and the main villain sneakily gets away for campaign number 2, mwahahaha, only to discover that my players went, oh, for heaven's sakes, we've been playing for a year and a half, and what's the conclusion? We get to play for another year and a half so that you can get to escape again. That's no fun whatsoever. No, the important thing here is that when a campaign ends, it means to be satisfactory, even if it is not satisfactory for yourself. This is another lesson that I have learned in my career, is that sometimes you have to give the players what they want or what they expect as their ending, even if you yourself are going, oh, but that's stupid. I mean, sometimes you just have to go, you know what? Let's do this. Derive satisfaction from the fact that they have played through your campaign, that you got them that far, that there was enjoyment, that they had anticipations, that there was this investment. It doesn't necessarily have to be just because it was your story plan all along. That's something that we need to get rid of very quickly, is this idea of ego that the GMs have or might not have. Risk in campaign creation is high, and I don't think we talk about it enough. I think people have these failures and then abandon and walk away. It's about understanding the risk so that when you start to see it happening, you can quickly change it and bring it back to where it should be. Kuda?
Nothing is easy, and when we undertake great tasks, we must always ensure that our intentions are pure. If we seek the adulation of our peers as a GreatGM, all that we will find is the hollow applause of those who are wanting to use us rather than to be our friends. The greatest risk that a campaign can suffer is if you alienate your players by demanding too much of them or they demand too much of you. It is always about balance. Find the balance to make sure your campaign does not tax you or your players too much, and accept that sometimes it's just about fun.
This week's challenge: design a campaign in broad terms. You could see it coming a mile away, let's be honest with you, you really could. But now it's time for you to actually design a campaign in broad strokes. We're going to look later on at the actual elements that you might need in your campaign. There's a sheet that I created a long time ago. There are videos already on it. I will make more if that is what you require or desire. Of course, we will make that happen. Let us know in the comments down below. Until next time, however, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.